Stream is up in five, four, three, two, one. And we're live, coming to you from an undisclosed location somewhere in Northeast Ohio. I'm Josh McClay, aka O'Malley of O'Malley's Adventure. That's Matthew Borgner, author of The Freedom Prescription. And this is Omally Live. I want to thank everybody for joining, whether you're watching live or in post. The number to contact the show is 234-650-4920, or you can email us at o'malleydsadventure@yahoo.com. This episode of Omally Live is brought to you in part by the Tremont Coffee Company for all of your hot and cold brewing needs. Visit the Tremont Coffee Company at 215 North Erie Street, Massillon, Ohio, Tigertown, USA. Matt, how you doing?
Real good. Glad to be here.
Um, you wrote a book.
I did indeed.
We are going to talk about the book, but first give us a little bit of background as far as who you are, what you do, where you're from.
Well, I think we covered the name part all right.
Yep.
I'm a local yokel, actually 5 minutes up the road from where we are now, but this is an undisclosed location, right? So
Yes.
I'm not sure what that means to folks. But anyway, I'm basically a regular guy,
Right?
educated, but a regular guy. I've got a wife, middle-class type person, middle-class type lifestyle.
Okay.
And writing is something that I'd never tried before, something I always thought about doing. And this is my first venture into that sort of thing.
So what gave you the idea to write the book?
Well, as I mentioned before, it's something I've always wanted to do, but really what drove me to write this book, The Freedom Prescription, and obviously it's about freedom, but
Right.
A little bit more to it than that. And what got me going was I'm kind of a news junkie, so I like to follow the news, mostly national stuff.
Okay.
And so I'd get home, flip on the TV, put on the news, and invariably I should let folks know right out of the gate, I come from a conservative perspective, so
Right.
you might as well know that. I have no problem telling you that. If you take a look at my book, you're going to probably see, of course, it's got an introduction and a conclusion, but it's also got a foreword and an afterword because I just want people to know, kind of what you're getting into.
Right.
So I kick on the news, and it'd be like a daily thing. I'd be listening to the political narrative, and we can talk a little bit more about what that means.
Right.
But my blood would start to boil. I'd be listening to people from the left. And when you turn on the news, I'm not sure that, this shouldn't be news to the folks, but there isn't much news anymore. I mean, it's not the news like it was 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
The news now is basically you're listening to people's opinions. And I mentioned the narrative before. So what is the narrative? It's really a sales pitch.
Right.
I mean, you turn on the news and you're getting somebody's sales pitch. That's what it's like these days. And from a conservative perspective, you turn on the news and I'd be listening to folks coming from the left and talking about me,
Right.
my beliefs, and they would characterize me as hateful,
Right.
intolerant, bigoted, homophobic, et cetera, all these pejoratives. And so I find myself sitting there and thinking, I'm hateful? Am I hateful? I'm thinking, who do I hate?
Right.
Who do I hate?
Sure.
Now, I graduated from Ohio State University. I'm a big Buckeye honk, so sometimes on Saturdays in the fall, I conjure up a little bit of hate for that team up north, but that's not exactly what we're talking about here, right?
Right. Right.
A little
right.
different,
A little
right?
different. Right.
A little different than that. So I'm listening and I'm thinking to myself, this is not a fair description of conservatives
Right.
and where we're coming from. So I thought to myself, rather than screaming at the TV and screaming at the radio, unlike you, I don't have a forum of my own, right?
Right. Right.
So I'm thinking to myself, what can I do to let folks know I'm not hateful, I'm not racist, I'm not bigoted, I'm not homophobic, I'm just a conservative. I look at things a little bit differently.
Right.
And so that's when I got the idea of writing the book.
Okay.
So I'm thinking to myself, I kind of got an idea what I want to write about, but how am I going to configure this thing? How am I going to make it make sense? How am I going to organize it?
Right.
So I'm listening more to this political narrative that I'm getting from the left, and I start to think to myself, how can I break this down? And I started to notice the folks from the left seem to always have, once you get through the sales pitch,
Right.
once you get past the false narratives, really,
Mm-hmm.
and you get down to policy and you get down to direction for America, it seemed like I started to notice that issue after issue, not all of them, but most of them, issue after issue after issue, their solution was government, more government.
Right.
And so that that was one of the things I thought they're different. They think differently than I do.
Right.
To them, that's always a solution. It's in one of the things that's important to keep in mind if you're going to check out my book and read my book, please do, is that I'm writing from the perspective of an American living in the 21st century that's trying to figure out what's the best direction for America. I'm not talking about, for example, let me back up a little bit more. Right now in America, we have too much government. We've got
Absolutely.
a huge government. It's too large, and it's too big in scope as well. And scope, what I mean by that is really the reach.
Right.
I mean, it's a
That,
leviathan.
that's one of the things I highlighted.
Wait.
It's
Yeah, you kind of get
right.
the drift when you read the book.
Right.
So, if it were 1800 and we had children working 10 hours in factories, I wouldn't be able to make that argument.
Right.
But this is the 21st century, and we live in a different America now. And more government today is not more freedom. More government today is quite the opposite. Government, as it grows, it's so big now that if we continue to grow government, there's an inverse relationship now between government and freedom.
Right.
So that's another, that's something another thing that I posit through the book, is that there's an inverse relationship between freedom and government. So you've got the left, whose answer typically is more government. Well, what's the antithesis of that? What's the opposite of that?
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's more freedom.
Right.
So from my perspective, this is where I started putting things together for the book. Because with the book, I took 21, I call them hot button issues of the day,
Right.
and I described the issues. We talked a little bit, I discussed that a little bit. I defined terms, and then each chapter I take each issue and I put it through what I call the freedom test, the test
Okay.
of freedom. So, we've got two parties in America, as we all know. We got the Democrats, we got the Republicans.
Right.
And in the book, I create a spectrum, kind of like a light spectrum,
Yes.
where you've got all the way on the left, let's say bright light, and then gradually as you go to the right, it gets darker and darker and darker until you have total darkness. So we've got two parties that are complete opposites of each other right now.
Yes.
You got I put the Democrats on the left. Don't
Right.
you think they belong on the left? What about the Democrats on the left, right? Since
The
they're the leftists.
the postmodernists, I call them.
Okay, good enough.
Right.
And then on the right, we've got the Republicans, and more aptly, we should say the conservative faction of the Republican parties to the right.
Right.
The Democrats now have, they have been controlled probably for the last 20 years or so by the left-wing faction of that party. Nancy Pelosi's been in charge, whether she's been in the majority or the minority. She's been in charge for quite some time. And now we've got AOC and the squad, even further left than her.
Right.
You've got Bernie Sanders now, an avowed socialist,
Right.
who there for a while looked like he may be the guy representing the party in the presidential election.
Right.
So you've got socialism on the rise in the Democrat Party, and that's just a fact of the matter.
Yeah.
So, that's all the evidence you need to say that they are to the left, and they've been moving further and further to the left. So I take these issues of the day and I go through the freedom test, and what that is me deciding or determining and giving evidence to the fact that freedom falls on the right.
Most of the time, yes.
Conservatism,
Yes.
most of the time, right?
Yep.
At least in 21st century America,
Right.
that is really one of the contentions of the book. So each chapter we discuss the issues, define terms, then we go through the test of freedom, and then uh, again, the title of the book is The Freedom Prescription. So I give a prescription to win the political narrative.
Sure.
Also, after we do the test of freedom,
Right.
and then a few truisms to kind of sum things up at the end of each chapter.
I like the truisms.
You like them?
That's a good part of the way that the book is constructed, from the dialogue to the two parts to the truisms at the end. I think that's there's probably no better way to break down chapters that are laid out like this, as far as topics go. Because I think people have lost complete common sense when it comes to truisms. I mean, it's almost
Well,
like,
there's a phrase, "That's my truth." I mean, you
Right.
turn on the news and hear people interviewed, and, well, that's my truth. Like, there's only one truth,
right,
your truth.
right. Before we get too far along, I figured out who that is. I've been watching those comments. I do believe that that is your biggest fan chiming in the chat.
I think I can guess who.
I bet you that, and he wants a shout out. He's
Whenever you're ready.
you go ahead. He's
Am I putting these on?
no. He's just
Oh.
in the chat. He just wants you to.
I can't read that. My eyes aren't good enough.
Let's see if we do
Can you
this.
help me out?
Yeah, I mean, do this once.
Not getting any younger, you know.
How about that? I believe. Is that him?
I see we've got some Ohio State fans, so that's good. I'm liking that.
Right. Because it says, right? Dad, shout me out.
Oh, Lord.
I believe that is your biggest fan
That's
right
my
there.
biggest fan. That's my son Blake, my
Yes.
10-year-old son Blake, that thought when he heard I was going to be on a YouTube channel, all of a sudden I became so much cooler,
Right.
and he wanted to come today.
Right.
But he's not here.
Right.
He's where he belongs, home.
Watching.
Do your homework.
Do your homework. Anyway, let's jump a little bit into the book.
Okay.
Let's see.
Can I say a little bit about freedom?
Absolutely.
Because, so here, really one of the biggest goals for me while I was writing that book is as I mentioned before, the thing that got this going was turning on the television or turning on the radio and hearing people talking about what a horrible person I am
Right.
for being a conservative.
Right.
And so we're in a real polarized time right now.
Yes.
Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Very polarized time. So I wanted something for folks to understand, as I mentioned before, understand what conservatism is all about.
Okay.
And I thought freedom is something that unifies us all.
Right.
Freedom, Josh, good concept?
Good concept.
Bad concept? I mean, it's a good concept.
I think it's a great
Do you think
concept.
it's a good concept for the rest of America?
I think everybody should entertain that idea.
Right, and the rest of the world as well.
Right.
So in a polarized society that we have now, I thought that's the kind of issue, freedom, that can bring us all together.
Right.
We all want freedom. Even people on the left purport to want freedom.
Right.
And we got so many people that consider themselves non-political. I've had a few people call me up after they read the book and tell me things like, hey, I really enjoyed the book. I agree with everything in the book. And I'm thinking, that's great. I love that. However, I've never met anyone in my life that I agree with 100% of the time.
Right.
You don't have to agree with everything in the book.
Exactly.
And that's okay. And in our culture right now, we can't just seem to agree to disagree.
Right.
And that's one of the problems we have. But I wanted to use freedom because everybody seems to want more of it. And I want people that are non-political. Those are the ones I'm really interested in hearing what
They think.
They're the ones that I'm really writing the book for.
Sure.
Not preaching to the choir so much, but for those people that turn on the TV and they listen to people telling them how horrible conservatives are.
Right.
I want them to read that book and to understand where we're coming from.
Right.
You know,
I think one of the biggest problems today is people were taught by label, you fit in this box,
oh man,
and you will always be in this box.
hmm
And that can't be further from the truth. When I'm a hardwired refusenik. I mean, even people that I'm good friends with, if they tell me to do something, there's going to be an instant pushback, right?
hmm
So when people start putting me into a box, then I mean, sometimes just for general purpose, I will do something to make sure they understand. Look,
you don't belong in that box, do you?
I'm an individual,
Right.
right? I'm not a
hmm
D or an R. I'm Josh McClay, and that's I think how I should
Right.
be treated. And with freedom, that's what you get,
hmm
right? The
Yep.
individual
Right. Exactly right.
versus group think,
Well,
and that's I think that's where the polarization is, because what I'm finding is people that disagree instantly they want to shut the dialogue off.
sure, we got a
That's
whole lot of that going
that's reckless.
on.
That will destroy
We've
the
got
little
that
bit that's
going on.
left.
I think we see so much of that with our race relations now.
Yes.
So much of the I don't agree with you, so I'm going to call you a name, try
Right.
to shut you down, try to shut you up,
Right.
and yeah, we see a lot of that, and also a lot of in the book I call them grievance groups,
Yes.
and that's where we've got politicians, and I see it on the left all the time, and I know I'm going to sound like I'm beating up on the left all the time. I guess I am, but they're the ones that are looking at individuals and saying, okay, you belong in this group. You're a
Right.
woman, you belong in this group.
Right.
You're an African American, you belong in this group.
Right.
You're a gay individual, you have to go to that group.
Right.
And yeah, conservatives just don't look at folks that way. At least people like me don't.
Right.
And you mentioned something, the individual, that's the smallest
Right.
group.
Right.
I
I
stand for the smallest group.
right. And that's I've one thing that I try to one of the litmus tests I use. I believe that the person is the primus of the state, right? And I have individual rights in spite of the state.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
if you look at things that way, and you look at the fact that every state in this country has a regulation for water collection, and people are okay with it. Water. I mean, if you don't have it, you die. But every state regulates you collecting water. And once because I don't remember whose book I read that discussed that, but so I was like, okay, that can't be right, and it is.
Hmm. Yeah, I didn't know anything about that.
Yep, water, and that's to me when you look at how expansive government is. If it's to the point they're telling me how to collect
Sure.
water or whether or not I can or not,
Yep.
we got a problem.
Yep.
So anyway, do you want to jump in?
Um, not sure where to jump in at.
I
Tell me
got
what.
I got I
Tell
have
me.
number one.
I was gonna say you told me you got a lot of notes
I've,
over
I
there.
have
So
I have something highlighted.
yeah.
Understand, we do need government. Taxation and social safety net are a few of what I consider the necessary functions of government. But make no mistake, freedom sides with lower taxes, smaller, less intrusive government sector for America. And I think with that's pretty much what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
But intrusive, I mean, we're at an entire different level now. If you look at this room, there is nothing in this room that Uncle Sam don't regulate.
That's right.
And you know, so if they regulate it, then the question becomes, do you really own anything? You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's the next step.
Mm-hmm.
And we see certain political factions
Sure. And
push
there's
toward
a reason why socialism is not so radical to some of us.
right.
And that's exactly part of the reason why, right?
Yes. Yeah, an astounding
Yeah.
yes. Let's see.
And if you don't mind me jumping
Go
in,
ahead.
I started off the book talking about monetary issues,
Yes.
and then moved on to the social issues.
Mm-hmm.
A couple chapters on monetary issues. Taxes came right in, jumped right in
Right.
there with taxes. They're not some of your sexier topics,
Right.
but they affect everybody. And
Absolutely.
one of the things I mentioned how many times in the book I don't even know is that your money is your freedom, right?
Yes.
And it's funny how if you woke up tomorrow, if we woke up tomorrow and we turned on the news and we found out that the Supreme Court somehow had outlawed abortion,
Right.
people would go berserk. People would lose their mind. Americans would be losing their mind
There would
over
be
that.
riots.
Yeah, there would be.
Yeah.
And how much does that subject affect you daily?
Right.
I mean,
Very little.
I don't anticipate
Right.
that issue affecting me personally. I don't know. Anytime soon, maybe never for the rest of my life. I don't know.
Right.
But taxes do
Daily.
daily.
Every time you put gas in your car.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I want people to look at the government coming for your taxes and equate that to the government coming for your freedom because it is.
Right.
And
Well,
people don't get upset like they should when the government's coming for your taxes. They're just like, hey, same old, same old.
right. Well, in certain forms, I've always like right now, there's certain issues on the ballot, and we vote, and I believe that's the process, and I enjoy that process.
Sure.
But when I look at things like my federal tax, okay, if you believe that any exchange in property or goods should be one that's truly voluntary, then our certain state and federal taxes are theft because it presumes that the state or federal government has a higher stake claim to your property than you do.
Yes, sir.
Because if you don't pay a bill, you get a bad credit score. You don't pay Uncle Sam,
Hey,
there's an
they
alternative.
can take your freedom from you,
They can take your freedom from you.
and
Exactly.
they do.
Right.
Not to me.
Right. So, anyway, it says, where, when, and how did you or any American get the right to the fruits of someone else's labor? And then it goes on and it says, finally, if it's unjust for you to take what belongs to your neighbor against his will, then why do you believe
That you can
that it's
send the
acceptable
government.
to send a government
Yep.
to do the same?
Exactly.
And
Right.
that's right. And I don't know if people exactly, I think it comes down to, well, this is the way we've always done it, so it must be okay.
And not only that, because the majority decided that it's okay. In
Right.
some cases.
In some
That's
cases,
what people
yes.
think. But that doesn't make it okay. I
Not,
mean, if you got the biggest yard in the neighborhood, do your neighbors have the right to vote to take some of your yard and make it a park?
eminent domain. It happens.
Yes, it does.
It
Some
happens.
scary cases of that.
Chapter 13, Size and Scope of Government. According to Congressional Research Service, in a report from October 2019 entitled Federal Workforce Statistics Sources, the U.S. federal government had a breakdown of total federal employment at over 4.2 million. The U.S. federal government employs nearly double the number of workers than Walmart. The U.S. federal government is very big indeed.
Indeed.
And Walmart employs 2.2. It's twice. Now that's federal.
Yeah. Just federal.
That's just federal.
Just federal. Think of all the state employees and then
Local,
on and on.
right? Well, and
Huge.
and-
Think about that, folks.
right, and-
Almost double the size of Walmart. The
right,
federal government. Federal employees.
right. And that's, you know, I believe a long time ago it was, I read a book where Kennedy wanted to make the FBI and the CIA one department because he thought government was getting too big. If you drop him into the political realm now,
Yeah.
he's more conservative than the current president, and he would be having a stroke.
Right. How would you fit him in the Democrat Party now? Right.
He can't.
Like trying to fit my grandfather in the Democrat Party.
Right, it wouldn't work.
My grandfather was a World War II veteran and retired from Ford Motor Company, and he was your typical Union Democrat.
Right,
And as I put in the book, it's just not the party. The Democrat Party is not the party of my grandfather.
right. Well, and I see it now. I'm a union member,
As am I.
union vice president for our local. Um, I think people would be surprised the number of people that are union members that are in that 40-ish to 50-ish that can't be part of the Democratic Party. I mean, they just, it's to a point where they've raced so far to the left that they've left the union worker behind.
Well, we had Reagan Democrats in the 80s.
The Blue
And
Dogs, right?
and we've got Trump Democrats now.
Yes, there, a lot of them. Well,
lot.
and I don't think
Couldn't have won without him.
I don't I don't know if you did you see the interview that Joe Biden did with the automotive worker.
I saw, yep. I
You
did
know,
indeed.
he's not helping the cause.
No,
You know, and
no.
again, you're talking about a basic individual right, someone's right to keep and bear an arm, and whether or not you're for or against the Second Amendment, I always tell people this: me in good conscience, I would never tell you when, if, or how you could defend your own life. That if you think about it in that context, and instantly, the Second Amendment, even to people that aren't for it, it gains traction. And I think, no, I think
Yeah, I mean, you hear folks say you don't need that. You don't need that to defend yourself. What? Nobody knows what you need.
right?
Nobody knows the future.
So, well, in the book, you talk about who's deciding who's the winner and losers. And when the government's deciding who the winners and losers are, when it comes to basic, individual rights, we run into some huge problems. That's one of them.
Yep.
Let's see, education. Let's see.
It's a good bit about that these days.
I didn't highlight. There was something I was gonna. I know what I was gonna say. Education. If I have a kid that's in school and I decide to put him in private school, I don't get anything back from the state.
Believe me, I know.
To
Because my 10-year-old that's listening and watching right now,
Right.
he goes to, we send him to St. Michael's in
Right.
Canton. So he's a Catholic school kid.
right.
And I was too.
Well,
As was my wife.
for I believe was it 5th through 8th grade, my three were down at St. Clement, and
I went there for 8th grade, by the way.
did you? There's a huge difference between, and I can't even call it quality education because it's more than that. How much a difference in the process. I mean, where essentially now we're teaching a test. In I believe it was 78, Carter created the Department of Education. By 1981, Reagan had implemented it. Prior to the federalization of our public schools, we put a guy on the moon. Now we can't teach a test.
Yeah, and as my father likes to say, he says, when I was a kid, we were tops in the world in science, math, pretty important subjects. Where
Yeah.
are we now?
Right.
We're not even close anymore. I don't know where we are exactly, but
Right.
we're not up at the top anymore.
And I think our public schools have the potential to be some of the greatest. But again, you have to use this word called deregulation, and a lot of people don't like it. I think the intent was good. But
Like
once
a
it's
lot of liberal
but,
policies.
right, but when it goes sideways, there has to be a point to where you say enough's enough. We got to pull back because there's probably, I don't know, 100,000 different studies that show throwing money at it, that's not the
Doesn't work.
solution.
No.
You know,
Doubling down on what's not working doesn't work.
right. And to me, after having 3 kids through the public and private school system, that was probably one thing that pushed me more to the right was when my kids started school.
I'll be there.
And I was like, because I remember being in school and I'm hearing what they're saying, and I'm like, now wait a second, something's wrong.
Yeah.
And by
And
the time they were graduating, something was really wrong.
the thought of having to send your child to a school to be taught and then bringing them home and then you have to unteach them, something's
Right.
wrong, right?
Yes.
Something's wrong with that.
And or one of the, and I believe it was math. One of the ways that they were taught to, it might have been what they call it, lattice or something. And I was like, why are they teaching you this? And I showed my kids the way I was taught. They picked up on it like
No
that.
kidding.
They done it that way. They took it to school. The teacher sent the work back home and said, no, they're not allowed to do it that way. Okay, they learned it and it was really quick.
My
Why not?
wife is the one that's been really in charge of homework
Mm-hmm.
for our son. And boy, you'd be preaching to the choir to her right now
Mm,
because she about goes nuts with the math for what
I
is the
bet.
same reason you're talking about
I
now.
bet. Yeah, it's
Yep.
amazing, and that we've come that far. And uh, I'm going to date myself a little bit. 35-ish years, that we've made that hard of a turn. Um, like I said, but I think that in particular, I think that one can be fixed. There's certain ones, and it's probably a topic for another show, but there are certain areas that can't be fixed. Those things would have to be overhauled and re-implemented. I mean, it's just out of control. Look at the U.S. tax code, and
Yes.
that's probably where I would start.
Yeah.
But anyway, wait,
Yep.
I'm saving that one for the end. Uh, Democratic socialism. Let's
Man,
let's talk about.
I remember the first time I heard democratic socialism, I thought to myself, what an ox! It's got to be an oxymoron, doesn't it? Democratic socialism.
Right,
I thought that doesn't even make sense to me.
right.
What does that mean?
Mm-hmm. And now I remember why I put it in this order. Democratic Socialist, and the fact that it's so accepted by a younger crowd shows the failure of our public schools,
Absolutely.
because they obviously haven't read about the gulags and the fact that Hitler initially was a socialist.
Sure.
He said, I'm going to give you everything. I'm going to give you mass transit, autobahns, train system, the Volkswagen, the people's car. I'm going to give you everything you want. But oh, by the way, I'm going to exterminate about 5 to 6 million people. You know,
Yeah, you thought taking their freedom was bad.
right,
I mean, taking people's lives.
right. And I don't think our public schools, there's no way they could be teaching that.
I don't know. I don't know how they could either.
But no, Democratic Socialist. Bernie is and AOC, and there's a few others that are sort of beating that drum. And in a way, you, you sort of look at it twofold. If Bernie runs, he's going to get eaten alive, right?
I'd love to see it.
But if he did, then that means that party as a whole would be pretty much finished, because that would be the new bar set, and that would be scary, because there are groups, and I hate to say it, that are 65 plus that would never in a million years, because they're so stuck in 1955, 1960, 1965, that they would never vote for an R.
No.
And so the fact that he's not doing well against Biden, but even Biden, I mean, if I'm not a Trump supporter. Trump is going to eat either of the party as a whole is spoon feeding the election to him. They're making
You're
sure that
saying
he's going to win.
Democrats are spoon feeding
Trump
the
the
election
election.
to Trump.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, you
Well,
you have Joe Biden. He can't put two sentences
oh,
together.
that's awful.
If there's a debate, again, and that's what I'm saying. Once we get past the primary, Biden, he's pretty much got it locked up. He's going to have a tough time. I think he will avoid the debates, or they will try to
They'll try to hide him, try to
try
protect
to
him,
try to groom him a certain way, or the debates being done a certain way to where he don't look that bad. But at the end of the day, when's the last time we had a candidate run that was, I don't know, less than 50?
Oh, no
I
kidding.
I think Clinton was younger.
I forgot how old he was, but
Yeah.
yep.
And you got two guys that, I mean,
It doesn't seem like a young man's game, does it? For some
no, it
reason.
doesn't. Not
And it's funny, not that they can't run and articulate themselves and be good candidates, but it just seems like that's not who people are choosing.
right.
People they're just not going for that.
No.
And here we are with the old white guys again, which is funny because, you know,
That's who that's who the you, you hate to say that that's who they dislike the most.
that's who
That's
they beat up on, though.
their narrative
Right.
dislikes that the most.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
So anyway, let's move on to this is in the afterward part. They hold power in the modern day Democrat Party and are led by the likes of Congresswoman Pelosi, Omar Tlaib, and AOC, along with Senators Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Chuck Schumer, among others. They aren't my grandfather's
Yeah,
Democrats. And I think,
we hit on that a little bit ago. Yep.
yeah, and I think some things that were said by that group, you touched on earlier in the book. If you interjected any other person or party saying the things that they did about minorities,
Can't get away with it.
no, you might go to jail. You might go to jail. That's an interesting group of people, and the fact that they gain track. And I've said this to a couple different people. Trump is just a symptom of the problem. The bigger problem is the people that vote and the people that actually see them as a viable source.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem. So when you said you're writing that book for the non-political people,
Mm-hmm.
that's almost a breath of fresh air, because those are going to be the people that save the process from sort of falling off that cliff. Because you could make an argument that that party could come back and actually be considered sane if the climate changes.
Yeah, and you had mentioned something. Did you say climate change? You changed the subject.
No. I haven't brought up climate change. That's
You mentioned something earlier. You said if Bernie were to win,
yes.
that something along the lines of blow up the party.
Well, he would be the main. The socialist idea would be the mainstay of that party. It would never go back to, and you hate to call Biden moderate, but compared to Bernie, he's
Right.
more moderate.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
I wonder. I've thought about, especially a few weeks back when it looked like Bernie. Who knows? He looked like he may have been on his way.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, where would this lead that party? I mean, would it end up go so far to the left that it has to bounce back and to be relevant again?
Right.
I mean, it made me think about those sorts of things. I don't.
I think what we're seeing is the party as a whole is starting to sort of eat itself. I mean, you got, especially when the first debates were on and you had 10 people up on stage. Mm-hmm. And, I seen things that at first I thought maybe they're joking around, but they weren't, and they were dead serious. And
You remember specifically what?
when they started speaking Spanish,
Oh,
like one done it, and the other was like, "Ha, I can do that too." Look, it's great that you're bilingual, man. Rock and roll with it. Mm-hmm. But we want to hear your policy. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you got to be kidding me.
virtue signaling is
Right.
what we were watching.
And the one person, and I'm telling you, someone like her is probably going to change that party, and that's Tulsi Gabbard. If she shifts on the Second Amendment and she shifts on health care, she can win. She's young, she's smart, she's electable. And, you know,
And
she,
as I told my wife, I said, watch this Tulsi Gabbard. She's about the only one I can stand that's up there on that stage.
well, the thing is, she's not afraid to punch.
No, it's true.
Having a president that's a military veteran, that she's
Appealing.
right. She's anti-military industrial complex. I think that's fantastic. But her views on healthcare and the Second Amendment and certain regulations, I mean, it's almost like, man, you're that
Yeah,
close.
she left you with a little hope, didn't she?
Yeah, you're like there, man. What?
Yep.
But it will be somebody like her, I think, that saves that party.
It would be so wonderful for this nation if we could get that party moving back towards sanity again.
Mm-hmm.
That's just my thought.
Well, if if you go back, like Kennedy cut taxes to stimulate the economy. He was pro-gun. He was Catholic. He believed in small government. He knew government was the problem. Like I said, you drop him into today, I don't know that he could win on the Republican ticket because there's some mainstream conservative types that aren't really conservative. They have that letter by their name. But, I mean,
There's a lot going on with that party. There's
Yeah.
a lot of big government people.
Right.
As President Trump calls them, the swamp. You got the
Yep.
swamp dwellers.
Yep.
The entrenched bureaucrats.
Yep.
You've got the globalists.
Yes.
You got a lot going on. It's a very squishy party.
Yes.
But then you got the folks, the conservative and libertarians, kind of off to the right, trying to keep them in a little different direction, I guess.
Keep
the right
sort of
direction.
pull back. Well, that even what we're going to say, probably half or more believe in the Patriot Act. They had a chance to get rid of it, and they kept it. Right? Destroys the Fourth Amendment. There's some things I've seen that makes me sort of stay very centered and very grounded. I mean, I hear what this person's saying over here, and I get it, but look at something as simple as national debt. I mean, it's off the charts. So I think that the system as a whole needs pull it this way just a little bit, and things will be fine. I do believe our process and our system is designed to self-correct, but it has to self-correct through freedom. I mean, there's no two ways about it.
Yeah, government's not the answer.
It you know, my parents, and I think there's something in here about marriage. Actually, it was gay marriage. But I've always told people I'm against any type of marriage that involves government. And here's why. I remember I was in high school. Hadn't even graduated. My parents were talking about back in the 70s when they got married, they had to have a blood test. I said, you had to have what? I said, you had to give up a bodily fluid, pay money to petition the state for a license to practice your faith,
Yeah.
and you call yourself liberal? That one floored me. So when I tell people
I never thought of it that way, but you're right.
that's amazing,
Yeah.
and people were like, oh yeah, man, we'll do that. I said, no, I won't. I will not. And so I think government's good at a couple of things: collecting money and cutting checks. That's it. That is it, right? They shouldn't be involved in marriage.
I hope they can defend us because, I mean, that's pretty much
As individuals, we do have the opportunity to defend ourselves as well. I think we've moved so far one way that it almost gets overlooked, like with marriage. People, they actually believe that if you and somebody that you love split, some guy in a robe is supposed to decide how this is going to play out. That to me, that I have a lot of issues with that one. My faith should be separate from government, and maybe that's too fundamental of a way. But when you see how marriage is played out and who steps in and who picks the winners and losers, I would much rather leave them out of that equation. So, anyway,
Fine by me, no argument there.
right. That's all I've got. Fantastic book.
Thank you.
I meant to ask you, did you happen to bring anything to hang on the wall?
No.
Because people, we have to add something to the wall.
We'll come up with something.
Well, yeah, I'm sure we will. Anyway, the book is on Amazon.
Yep.
There
Amazon
is
Books, Amazon.com.
there is a link in the description below. If you click on it, full disclosure, I am an Amazon affiliate. I get about 58 cents of the purchase.
What?
Yes. Now you're going to ask me, how do you know that? I know someone that bought the book. They let me know. And yeah. So,
Yeah, Amazon Books.
yes.
And I'm also doing let's see, week from Saturday,
Okay.
March 21st, going to do a little book signing event
Okay.
at Papa Bear's Restaurant in Belden Village in the bar,
Yeah.
noon till 2.
And what day is that?
21st. It's going to be
21st.
a week from Saturday, March 21st.
March 21st.
Papa Bear's. So get yourself a pizza. Best pizza around.
Papa
Everybody knows that.
Yeah.
Get yourself a pizza for lunch. Bring a book if you have one. If you
Yep.
don't, I'll have some with me.
Outstanding. Any chance of another book?
I started another book.
Yes. Nice.
Just the beginning of it.
Just the
It's
beginning.
a little bit of a spin-off,
Yeah.
and I don't want to tell you too
You,
much
you
about
don't.
it
You
yet.
can't give it away.
No,
I can't.
not yet. Not yet.
All right. That is all I have. Again, Papa Bear's March 21st. And what was the time?
Noon to 2.
Noon to 2. And that, my friends, is a wrap. There is no show for tomorrow. So that means today we sign off like it's midnight, it's Friday, and you're up past your bedtime. Until next week, God bless America. Long live the Republic. Peace.